This is me on my second birthday. A few months earlier, my family had left a high control group, also known as a cult. But when I was growing up, they didn't call it that. It was usually just the bad church.
Bring this up to a G. Well, no one joins a bad church, but we joined a church that very quickly was bad. It became bad as the pastors, especially the senior pastor, gained more and more control. He used that to cover up a lot of abuse and rotten things he was doing to people, and we were caught up in that.
When I was a child and a teenager, there was sort of a movement to cult-proof your children. And there was a teaching that came to me through our church that sort of indoctrinated us as to what a cult was and what a cult was not. So the problem with that was that the teaching was that it had everything to do with doctrine, nothing to do with the behavior of the group or the community or the coercive nature of the leader. So I was convinced that it wasn't a cult because our doctrine was right.
You can't necessarily tell that something's a cult just based on its belief system. They really come in all shapes and sizes. They can be based on any religion or no religion at all, and there isn't one specific kind of person that's drawn to them. What they do have in common are things like excessive dedication or demands made on their members. That's why they're called high control or high demand groups. And a leader who puts their goals above all else. And usually they achieve these goals with different kinds of manipulation or coercive control that cause a lot of harm. How did this church exert control over its members?
It did through loving and receiving its members in the beginning and affirming their value, their worth, the potential of them growing as Christians, and for me being a pastor, and for others, having a successful family and all of that. It seemed to reward with promises, those kinds of things, and that really drew you into the church.
You would think that I was experiencing traumatic stress in the community itself, but over that 10-year period, it became normalized, and the stress of the coercion and the pressure of conforming, it became a normal way of life that was not traumatic, at least I wasn't aware that it was traumatic, but leaving was very traumatic.
When I was 20, the pastor of the bad church was finally convicted for sexually abusing children and sent to prison. His trial got a lot of media attention. This was before the Me Too movement, and it was really unusual to see 7 women publicly talking about these kind of experiences. I mean, it's still really unusual, but I think back then it was especially brave. I remember when pictures from the courthouse started coming out, and that was actually the first time I'd seen the pastor's face or the faces of the people who stayed and supported him. Some of them were the parents of his victims. On the witness stand, they protected him over their daughters. It was such a relief to see his crimes finally exposed, as well as just the true nature of this group after so many years. My dad ended up writing his doctoral dissertation on abusive Christian churches, and my parents started SAFE, which is the Spiritual Abuse Forum for Education.
We started SAFE in 2017, and it was about wanting something that was not as locked down as a therapeutic group, but also was very specific in its focus of dealing with people coming out of these kinds of high-control cultic groups. We really let people come and go. Everybody's welcome. Grab a beer, come on in, you can leave when you want. We've tried to create an environment where a person who has been highly controlled simply won't find that with us, but they will find camaraderie and friendship. That's the first thing we want to provide. And then secondly, they'll provide some solid answers for what happened to them when they were in that group. Some academically vetted good material that they can think on.
Cults are a lot more common than many of us realize. A lot of people have heard of the horror stories like Jonestown or Rajneeshpuram or the Manson family, but the truth is most high control groups slip under the radar. I've witnessed my whole life that the harm they cause can be deep and lasting. A few simple things that anyone can do to help challenge their power are remain alert for signs of abusive communities or abuse in communities in general, and also reach out, provide support for people you know who are involved.